welcome to What's Possible, Conversations with World-Class Coaches. Today, I am thrilled to have my friend and SBC coach here, Sean Doyle. Welcome, Sean.
Hi, thank you, Eileen.
Great to have you join me. I'm particularly excited because Sean and I just had a great conversation on the topic that we're going to be discussing today. But before I go into that, let me do a quick introduction of this fabulous guest. Sean is a graduate from the master's program at UPenn in positive psychology, which many of our coaches are graduates from that premier program in positive psychology. But even before going to MAP, Sean was an attorney, continues to be an attorney. He is general counsel for a nonprofit. He is also the author of a book. And when I just asked him about the new book that he's writing, I found out that he's actually writing 2 books at a time. So Sean is kind of an overachiever. But Sean puts out great work into the world. You will want to get his book, Mud and Dreams, which, Sean, will you hold that up for us? It's stories and essays. And as we just discussed, not only are they really enriching stories and essays that you can walk away thinking more about and having it impact your life and your thought process in some way, it also at the very back of the book has all the science and research behind the stories and what makes them so powerful and impactful. So that is definitely a book that you will want to pick up. Every time we do an HR event, we always allow our guests to take away a book. As we have one winner who gets to take away a book of her choice. One person just reported back to me that Sean's book was the book that she chose, and she went on and on about how much it touched her. So with that, again, Sean, I am so pleased to have you join me today.
Thank you. No, I'm excited that we're having this discussion.
So today we are going to talk about connection. This is a topic that is probably my number one favorite topic to talk about. Relationships and connections are so incredibly important to me. And Sean had reached out to me. He was going to be doing a session with a group of men and said they were going to be talking about connection and wanted to talk to me and get some of my thoughts on it. And so when I contacted Sean and we started having this conversation, I said, we have got to take this to the webinar because we both feel equally passionate about this really important topic. So before we go further though, Sean, can you give us a working definition today of connection?
Yeah. So, certainly there are lots of different types of relationships and the thing in particular that I was doing the presentation on or working with the group on and that you and I discussed was kind of those deep connections between people. So the deep relationships, so that if you've got, is there somebody that you can call at 3 a.m. if there's something, or are there people that will call you at 3 a.m? And it's part of the discussion around it was about when we were younger and in school, you had class a few hours a day, but then had lots of time to hang out and really nurture relationships. But then as we get older and have families and have jobs and responsibilities, that the time gets condensed. We don't have as much of an opportunity to build relationships. So looking for ways that we can accelerate our time that we do have together, so that we do have those deep connections with other people that we can rely on.
Yeah, I guess what I hear you saying too is where you underscore that people who we can rely on. And I know we were talking about this. I was saying in my positive psychology certification course, that was one of the questions. Who could you call at 3 a.m.? And everyone's writing down their thing. And it was one of those moments where I stepped back and I said, I think it's more important who's going to call me, because then it shows what kind of friend I am. And we talked a lot about that. It's what kind of friend or how do you show up in somebody's world? And so what I hear in your definition is those people you can depend on and who can depend on you. There's that, and it's not necessarily just dependency, but it's also people who lift you up, who are part of your world when you need a boost.
That's right. Yeah, it's Yeah, and a lot of what I believe and what I've found from talking to a lot of people is that the the way that we form those strong relationships, so that we have people we can depend on, really comes back to, are we the type of friend that they can depend on us? It's how we're presenting ourselves, how we're holding ourselves out there, and that cracks the door to give the other person permission and sort of accelerates the time that we do have.
Yeah, there's that reciprocity, which
Yeah.
is so important. It makes me think of there way back in my past, there was one woman who was kind of part of a friendship group. However, she was a person who would only give, she would not allow any kind of
Yeah.
receiving. And it really, for the rest of us, it kind of almost put up a wall because we weren't able to reciprocate in the way and be the kind of friend that she had been to us, because there was that wall. And so I think there is that dance of being able to contribute to relationship and also to receive from relationship.
That's, I'd forgotten about that. That's a great point. In the VIA, the Values in Action Inventory about character strengths, one of the strengths in there is the capacity to love and be loved.
Yeah.
And it looks at both sides of that equation, that a lot of times people will be very, very good and comfortable about giving to others and expressing love, but then can't let it in themselves, which gets in the way of the relationship ultimately.
Yeah. It's hard because it feels it doesn't ever feel good for it to be one-sided,
Yeah.
where you're over giving or over receiving.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, I want to zone in. I think something that you brought up as you were talking about your description was that there are different times in our life where it really is easier to make those kind of deep connections. Through childhood, you have classes together, you have activities together, you go to college perhaps, and you have people in your dorm that you can make friends with, or a club that you've joined. And then you get out of that and you get into the working world, and you might have, your core group from the working world, but it does get a little harder. Or if you choose to become a parent and you've got the parents of your kids' friends.
Right.
So there are sometimes like kind of plug and play groups who you can end up connecting deeply with. And then there are times in your life where it's not quite as easy. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are in terms of that time of life when there aren't these ready-made groups. And what do you do to build those connections?
Yeah, and this men's group that I did the workshop with, the talk with, it was formed as an exercise group. A bunch of guys get together, volunteer led, work out in the parks in the morning. And as a result, when this was one of the founding ideas of it, that you end up forming relationships with people that are not based on where your kids go to school or what your career is or whatever else. So I've met all sorts of guys that I otherwise probably wouldn't have run into. And because I found for years my friends would be the dads of my kids' friends. And then the kids go to different schools. I'll never see my friend again.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes that's fine and that's great. But we also want some longer lasting friendships. We want ones that can go deep if we need to go deep.
Mm-hmm.
They don't all have to be super intense or whatever. But so one of the discoveries I've been making as I've been talking to a lot of people on this topic is to enter into the interaction or with the goal of creating a positive emotional connection during the interaction. So, it's easy. I think we can all think of times that we've gone to, parties in the neighborhood or functions at work or whatever else, that it's just small talk. And some people, for me, that's not particularly satisfying, the small talk conversations. And so But if you can tap into that thing, whatever the thing is for the individual that gives them that sparkle in their eye, that gets them excited and makes them come alive, that immediately accelerates the relationship. And even if the relationship doesn't go anywhere further after that, it just makes a positive moment for both of you that's shared together.
Yeah, I love that. Entering into a conversation where you spark a positive emotion. And we do know that from Barb Fredrickson's work, when you do create that positive emotion, that broaden and build, it generates more of that. And it makes me think of, as you know, my mom recently passed. And one of the things that was her biggest gift was connecting with people. And when I hear you say that, that was something that she did so naturally. And it just was asking people about them, learning about what was important to them, being able to hear and listen to what they said, and then comment based on that, so that it's really diving deep and having someone feel seen, valued, and heard. Yeah. And that creates that positive emotion too.
Yeah, and an important thing you said there is about the listening part of it, because a lot of times, I've got the background as a lawyer, I've got the psychology background and the writing. So if I'm a neighbor party and somebody asks me what I do, depending on my mood, I can flip in a different direction. but a lot of times people know about the lawyer hat and start asking a whole bunch of questions about that, which, I generally like what I do, and that's fine. And it's been a good career and been able to, I really like the mission of my organization, but that's not what gets me excited and passionate and come alive. But then sometimes people will get stuck on, I found out this piece of information about the person, and they keep asking questions, which is good, but limit it to that, as opposed to finding, okay, what's the thing that really seemed to spark their attention and get them excited.
Yeah. And pay attention to that and have that be where you dive. And it's just even that simple question of, hey, Sean, what brings you joy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where do you find joy in your week? Whatever, to start to find out what does light somebody up.
One of the exercises, you're probably familiar with it. One of the exercises we did in the MAP program at Penn was the positive introduction. Are you familiar?
Yeah, sure.
Where you ask someone to tell about a time when they were at their best. And it's not, I'm generally my best when it's a story. Tell me a story about the time that you really were the best, most aligned with who you are. And the person gets to define that however they want to define it. And I taught positive psychology at North Carolina State University for about 10 years. And that would be the first exercise I do with my students. And the whole rest of the semester, the connections were so much stronger because people immediately dove in. They got vulnerable, they opened up, and you'd find out what excited one another. I've tried that at some of the neighborhood parties, and it's, sometimes you get kind of the laugh and people try to avoid the question, which is still fun. But a lot of people, you see their posture change. It's like nobody's ever talked to me about that before. And they open up these worlds that I wouldn't have stumbled across if we didn't ask the question.
Well, and it's so powerful. I remember that during immersion week at MAP, and the assignment when they did it for us, and I don't know if it was the same when you were in MAP, the assignment was to think of it and write it on your own. And then, so we had a little preparation. And the funny thing is mine was all about connection, the story that I shared, and putting together a group of people and creating a community during COVID, creating a community where people could be. And it definitely is, it's my sweet spot. It's what I love most, is to take awesome people, introduce them to each other and watch it blossom. So, but what point that I want to make out, or the point that I want to highlight on that, not everybody in my group talked about this, super like just uplifting story. It can be really challenging, heart-wrenching things, but it shows the resilience piece or something that somebody learned. And so I think oftentimes we can assume that if we're talking to people, it always has to be about the good stuff if they're going to, and that's not how you get to depth by only talking about the good stuff. It's just peeling the onion, if you will, to understand people's world.
Yeah, and that's most of the time that I've gone through that exercise. People would share some of the hard things they had to deal with and how they were resilient and how they came through it. And then we would also, prep the people asking the question to listen for the strengths that they hear, call them out, point out, wow, when you did such and such, that really showed a edge, or whatever the situation is. I'd found with my students too, a lot of times people would, because I would do the same thing. I'd have them go home, think about it, write it out, come in. And a lot of them came with two stories. One that was sort of safe, and then one that,
vulnerable.
Dug a little deeper and was more vulnerable. And I even had one student, they gave the safe one, and then one of their classmates did a vulnerable one. And then the first one who went said, "Can I go back and do that again?" It made it safe for people to open up and, recognize that we're all people and we all go through stuff, and, we all have our moments, and ultimately we're all, we're pretty resilient. We're better than we think we are. And those are the things that come out in the stories.
Yeah. You just hit on something that I think is so essential when you're creating depth in relationship and trust in relationship, and building healthy connection, is opening the door to vulnerability and not having to present as perfect, not having to present as everything's buttoned up. But what I find for myself in relationships, when I think about my closest circle, or when I'm working with clients and I think about their relationships, it is typically people, when you can let down your guard and be vulnerable, it opens the door to other people feeling safe to do the same. And I think that takes a relationship from up here and brings it right down to where it can be much more meaningful and purposeful. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the vulnerability thing's hard because because not everybody always receives it well. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us have experience with that we wanted to share something and then the other person didn't. So part of it, again, it goes back to how we're holding ourselves out. That sometimes what people will do is they'll give a little hint to something, mm-hmm. Just sort of I'm not sure where's this going to go or if they're going to pick up on it. And those are the types of things to listen for. It's like, you commented on this. And then to show that you're open to it. And then sometimes you can add a little twist in there about your own vulnerability, which then again gives them permission for it. But sometimes we miss those things. And for the person who's wanting to reach out also, that's something important to recognize, that we may send out a little signal and maybe our closest friends don't even pick up on it. So maybe we need to mention it again, or maybe we need to mention it to somebody else. For this men's group, one of the speakers, we had a couple of people come and share some tough stuff they were going through. And then the people that were in their lives or weren't. And one of them had just recently checked in and then went through a rehab for alcohol abuse. Mm-hmm. And a couple of years before that, he sent me the obituary of someone that he knew where, when somebody dies of, suicide or alcoholism or some of those sorts of things, we usually don't talk about it in the obituary. I mean, it's
Mhm.
very generic. This one, his family, the person who passed away, really went into the struggles that the individual had had, and to let other people know this is normal stuff, and that it's something, don't be quiet about it. So my friend sent me this obituary, and then a couple years later, when he was checking into rehab, I started wondering, was that his little
Yeah.
subtle outreach to me that I missed? I mean, I asked a couple of follow-up questions, and I got to ask him that. It's like, did I miss it? He's like, I don't. He doesn't think that's what he was doing, but he said, maybe there was some of that under the surface.
Yeah.
But to be, attentive to those things, and if we're the ones reaching out to recognize, even the people who love us and are closest to us may miss some of the things, and it's okay to ask again or to reach out again.
Yeah. And be, as much as possible, and I know it's hard, but as much as possible being direct. And because I think oftentimes as humans, we expect people to interpret what we're thinking and saying, and directness goes a long way to, so that if you don't know what I'm asking, if I say it directly, hey, Sean, I really could use X, Y, or Z, instead of hoping you're going to figure this out. There are two other things as we've been talking that came up for me that I think they go hand in hand with relationship, and is just, we talk a lot about psychological safety in the workplace. And I think psychological safety within friendships and connection, and feeling that you have that space that is yours, and that you can share and not be judged. And then also not worry about how somebody is taking in your information or how it will be used against you, and having that safe feeling. And I'm curious what your thoughts are in terms of creating a psychologically safe friendship.
I think part of it goes back to laying that groundwork first. So touching on those things that kind of ignite that sparkle in their eyes, the things that give them energy, those are the types of connections that then accelerate the time that we have together.
Mm-hmm.
And then it starts to build that relationship, so that when you need somebody that you can be vulnerable with, they're more likely to already be established. It's a little bit tougher if you don't have any of those relationships and you're needing to reach out at the same time. It's
Right.
Then it is harder to gauge and harder to say, I don't know if I can share this with folks, because you don't feel safe with it. But it's remarkable how quickly how fast the relationships really can grow and get those. And again, these shouldn't all be deep, heavy conversations. I mean, there should be fun.
Fun is important.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't want to leave that impression, but it's through those, finding the thing that makes the other person come alive. That, I think, then accelerates it and gets to a place where there is some of the psychological safety that you'd mentioned.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think showing somebody that they feel seen and valued, and that doesn't have to be a deep something.
Right.
When I think of kind of, you and I talked a little bit about this when we had our conversation the other day, is you also think about red flags. So if I'm thinking of people who I'm bringing into my world, there are a couple things that I know for me is a red flag. If somebody I've noticed is talking disparagingly about other people regularly, or super negative about everything, these are red flags in terms of because it makes you feel vulnerable. If you're talking about everybody else, I'm next on your on your list, and I'm not interested in talking negatively about a bunch of people. So that's one huge red flag for me. And the other one too, it's funny, it came up in a conversation the other day, is competitiveness. I'm a huge believer that there's more than enough to go around, and I want to celebrate your wins. And so when I have friends in my group, I cannot wait to hear wins that they have. Yes, I'm going to be there to help pick them up when life knocks them down. But I also want to be screaming at the top of my lungs when something awesome happens. For example, something just even with my brother and sister-in-law just had a huge work win. And it's like, oh my gosh, I am so tickled. And I think oftentimes competitiveness can impact whether it's family relationships and that connection or friendships. And it's just something that I am keenly aware of in my world is not bringing in competitive energy. I love energy that inspires me. For example, you know, you in the process of writing 2 books and having written one, I'm like, ooh, you inspire me to get my one book off, out into the world. But it's not a competition. There is plenty of work out there. There's plenty of love.
Yeah. It reminds me of a concept that I hadn't thought of in years. I think the short name for it is Berging. Bask in the reflected glory of other people.
Oh, I like that.
So that it's when somebody else is celebrating, celebrate with them. There is it's not it shouldn't be a race to some competitiveness or whatever. It's bask in their reflected glow,
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Love that. Any other things that you can think of on the top of your head of any red flags or green flags? What draws you in or has you think twice?
Yeah, the red flags, that's a great point. There was this isn't one that would come up often, but it's just kind of being aware of, again, it's being aware of what other people are saying and where they are. When this was years ago, I'd started a job with a law firm. I was an associate working for one of the partners, and the partner pulled me aside and said, Sean, I want you to make sure never mistake your clients for your friends. They're just, a means to bring in money for you. And my immediate thought with my boss telling me this was, what's my role? It's like, I'm a means to bringing in money for you. It's like,
exactly.
All right. So it's like, okay, I get it.
Thank you.
So you just plant the flag in the ground. It's like, all right, that helps me define the boundaries in where we work together and just be attentive to that. It doesn't mean that, at some point the relationship may change and you may move past it. But right now, that's where the flag's been stuck in the ground. And so being aware of that stuff. That same job, I went out with one of the other partners, one of his longtime close friends, who I just met this one time, and he said, "Do you know about?" and then named the other person. He was about to gossip about them. And again, it's like, all right, but I'm just meeting you right now, and now you're going to gossip about my boss, your friend. Don't tell this guy anything that I don't want shared. It's like,
exactly.
It's like, put that flag in the ground. So
I am not a fool to believe I'm any different. Yes,
right,
exactly.
Right. Yeah, so being attentive to that stuff and
listen to people's words and watch their actions. Yeah. And I'm assuming you're no longer there because you're now at the nonprofit.
That's right. Yeah, I haven't been there in 20 plus years. So
of course, I say this at the end of every webinar. I'm like, I want to keep talking about this. I love talking about connection. And one thing that we do know from the longitudinal studies, I know Harvard has the longest study out there, relationships and connection, it is what matters throughout life. It is the key to happiness. It is the key to joy. It's the key to good physical health too. Yeah. So it is a topic that you can think casually about, but it really is, it's important.
And the numbers matter. I mean, it's great to have a couple of people that you can go out with or hang out with or reach out to, but they're not always going to be available. or they might miss some of the cues. And so if you have other people that you can rely on, the diversity of the relationships matter, different age groups, different genders, different backgrounds, because they're going to come at it with a whole different perspective that can help us through things and provide different meaningful inputs for us, and all of that is so important, and it's fun too. I mean, that's the thing. Is this it takes being conscious of it, but it's not hard. It's not difficult, painful stuff to do. It can actually be a whole lot of fun, connecting with people. So, I'm going totally off road for just 1 minute. Let's come up with 10 things. We'll ping pong back and forth, 10 ways to bring new people into your life. Okay. Because I think that's one thing. I know I have several clients who struggle with this, particularly later in life, trying to figure out, how do I build community? How do I bring people in? So let's just ping pong for just 10 things is all we need to come up with. Why don't you start? All right. So I am very big on meetup groups. You familiar with the meetup groups?
Yes, you took mine. Okay.
I organize those all the time, different topics. And it's just like, here's something I'm interested in. Let me float that out there. And I've got now friends, I don't know how long Meetup's been around, 15, 17 years, that I met through some of these things that are from way different backgrounds. I mean, those have been tremendous. So that's the low-hanging fruit.
It's not low-hanging fruit. Because I was going to say that's the top number one thing that I always suggest. But a lot of people don't know about it. So meetup.com is what we're talking about. And you can create your own group. So we'll use two different ones. So one is create your own meetup group. The other is join somebody else's meetup group. So we've got two different things right there for you. And they're on every topic imaginable. Right. I have a client who joined a biking group. She hadn't exercised in years, loved bike riding. She joined a Saturday bike group and went from 0 miles to doing some bike ride. I think it was 175 miles with her Saturday group. So she got in shape and built community. So, okay, there's two right there. And I'll comment on the meetup some more. And people absolutely show up to a group and not necessarily feel a connection to other people. Or maybe there's one person, go to another one. I mean, it's because there have been so many of these things that I went to that you go and you do whatever the topic is, but I didn't necessarily form a lasting relationship. But then other ones, you really resonate with someone in the group. So it's just a way to the meetups are fun because it's around a shared interest. And or a new interest.
Yeah.
It could be something you want to pursue.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I need to think of another one. How about this? I'm gonna deviate from the instruction a little bit. So I think one thing that gets in the way. So now that my kids are all hatched and fledged and flown and out of the house, now at first I thought this is great. Now I have so much more time to go do stuff with my friends. But my friends, most of them still have kids that are involved with all the stuff that they're involved with. So, there's a couple friends when like one of them is going to his son's high school football game, I'll tag along too. And it's a way that he's still there, celebrating what his son's doing with the school activities. We're hanging out, just, having a good time.
Love it.
So it's a way to incorporate. So look for the things that other friends are doing that you want to deepen those friendships, and tag along.
I love that. Perfect. That's a great one. So we're at 3. I'm going to throw in volunteer. Do some kind of volunteer that really fills your heart. And we know that serving others, going back to Sean's point at the very beginning, it does create positive emotion. And so that's one of the quickest ways to flood your body with some real good, feel good chemicals while building community at the same time. So volunteer. Number 4, Sean.
All right, we're going to start getting a little tougher. How about talk to strangers, and with that, not just talk to them, but go, ask them to tell about a time that when they're at the best, or to try to find that spark in their eye. I get the feeling a lot of times people are going to not want to talk to you, but that's okay. It's because you'll find some folks, and that could be different. So
I love it. I actually met a friend on the plane, and I'm usually the one who puts the ear pods in. So talking to a stranger, perfect. I'm going to kind of steal one that you started with, and that's join a gym. You talked about the group, the exercise group. It might not be a gym, but some kind of fitness thing. It might be signing up for a race and training for a race or what have you. But working out, exercise, again, it puts everybody in a better mood. And so you've already got good chemicals flooding your body as you're trying to create bonds. So that would be number 5.
Yeah, and that's probably the thing I annoy my kids about more than anything else, is them going out exercising with other people, because there's so many good things about that. And my daughter joined a run club with the local brew pub. They had twice a week they get together and run, and then now she's started rock climbing with them. They part of this group, so it's connections and the all the benefits from the physical activity. All right. On that theme, look for. So it could be the local brew pub. It could be other, community places in the community that draw people together. But a lot of them put on activities. So this one in particular, they've got 2 nights a week. They do the run club. They do karaoke 1 night a week, which my daughter goes to. They do music bingo, which she goes to that. So she's, really folded herself into this new community. And she doesn't even drink. I mean, she goes and she'll order a soda. She doesn't drink alcohol at all. But it's just about going and connecting and hanging out. And she's met a whole group of people kind of same stage of life that she's now involved with.
That's fantastic.
We'll call it community anchor institutions. How about that?
I love it. Okay, that's 6. Number 7, I am going to say create a Zoom community with old friends. I think Zoom has really opened up our world a little bit. And yes, it's not the in-person touch points, but I know for myself, I did this, and I know so many other people during COVID. We started connecting. My old high school group, we connected. My old work group, we connected. And so fostering those relationships over Zoom with people who are not in your back pocket.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good one. All right. What else? I feel like we're missing something super obvious.
I'll tell you the one. I've moved a bunch. The one that I have done, so just to get your brain, give your brain another minute to think, is every time I've moved, I've joined a tennis team. And that has been how I have met people. And it's not just through, say, a club or something. The local rec centers have free games you can join. And that's what I did when I moved to Northern California. And one of my best friends I met from that. And every time I've moved, I've joined a team, and you don't have to be a great tennis player. I am not a great tennis player. And so it's actually more fun when you're not, because you can laugh on the court most of the time. So joining a team, it doesn't have to be tennis, but joining some kind of team, and you can grow together. All right, we only need 2 more.
All right, get a dog.
Yes.
During the pandemic, we got a dog, and well, I know all of the dogs' names in the neighborhood. I know most people's names too. But she's got a super, super rich social life, and it's us out walking. You meet other people with dogs, but then a lot of people come over that don't have a dog. They want to greet your dog. And so that's been a great way to meet a lot of people.
I love that. And then again, and more feel good chemicals flood in the body with your dog. Okay, the last one I'm going to say is start a book club or start some kind of club. I think oftentimes when I'm working with people trying to build community, they're trying to find a community to fit into and create your own where you get to, and even if you only know one person where you live, let's say you've just moved, have them invite somebody and then have that person invite someone. So create a community where you initiate. So whether it's through a book, whether it's through going to museums, whether it's going to a fun restaurant, once a month, but create some kind of club or community.
Yeah, and I mentioned the men's workout group that led to the talk that I did. It was started by a guy here in North Carolina who was in the military, and he didn't want to join a gym. He knew how to work out, and so he and a buddy would get together in the public parks, and then one of them invited a friend, and then somebody else invited a friend, and now they've got. In Raleigh, there's about 4,000 guys in the group. In Charlotte, where it started, there's more than that. They've spread to about 30 cities. And it's all free, volunteer-led, in the public parks, so you don't have to join anything. And it starts at people show up for the exercise, but then what it's really about is the connections that you're making, connections with folks across the board. So,
I love that. It's show up for exercise, leave with friends.
Yeah.
So, normally we play 1, 2, 3, but since we just did this whole, I feel like we gave every action some ideas. I think we incorporated that in that ping pong. Why don't we just close out with what's possible when people have connection in their lives?
So you'd mentioned it that, the majority of the studies that are out there about our physical health and our emotional well-being and our sense of life satisfaction and happiness in life, really one of the most robust contributors to that are positive relationships with people. And they're the relationships in the fun times. It's people to call when you really need somebody to reach out to. And they're fun to form, and they're good for us. It's good for both sides of the relationship. I mean, it's everything is possible through these positive emotional connections and relationships that we form with one another.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I am so grateful to be connected to you. I feel like our listeners are probably like thinking, oh, I wish Sean was my friend. And so I feel grateful that you are my friend. So thank you so much, Sean, for being here today.
Oh, no, thank you. And I mentioned the listeners don't know this, but I told you that when I first reached out to you about helping me prepare for this other event, I was thinking through, well, who are people that I know that help kind of ignite that sparkle in me, that make me feel alive. And you were one of the very first people I thought of and reached out to. So I really appreciate our friendship and the opportunity to do this. And so thank you.
That means the world. Thank you so much. And I cannot wait for part 2.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you.